Morning and welcome to the 9th and 10th grade coffee. We started doing these sessions. I'm Carolyn Middleton. I'm the director of college counseling, and welcome to this program. We started doing these sessions when I first started at Berkeley Carroll, and they were in person and we served coffee, but we've since moved them to being online or Zoom versions and webinars because we knew it would make it a little bit more accessible for folks to join us. So we're glad you're here. We will be recording this and sending it out as well. So if you wanted to rewatch it, or you wanted somebody else in your family to have the opportunity to be able to see this today, see what we talk about today, we're happy to share that with you within the next couple of days. What we did in collecting the information from you all about what you wanted to hear is we put together an agenda of what today's conversation is going to be about. And my colleagues and I, you'll meet in a moment Louis Almonte, who is our Associate Director of College Counseling. You'll also meet Joelle Chen, who is another Associate Director of College Counseling. And you can see on screen Mary Dunn, who's our Operations Manager. We all collectively put together this agenda, which now that I look at it, looks pretty full. So we're pretty excited to be able to make sure that our plan is to make sure that we're providing this information to you at points in time that are helpful to you in order to assist your students. So we have touch points with students in 9th grade and 10th grade. We ramp things up a bit more in 11th grade and certainly work with families all the way through 12th grade. And my email is going to become very familiar in your inbox if you haven't started seeing it already, because we do a lot of programming throughout the year. We do some that's in conjunction with some of our colleagues at other schools in the Brooklyn area. So far this year, we've already done a session on historically Black colleges and universities, where we had a gathering of alumni who talked about their experiences. Just the other night, we had a program on international education. I'll be sending that recording out to all grades, all families and students in the next couple of days. We have an event coming up in January that's a gap year program, and that one is actually in person. So for students who are interested, or families who are interested in exploring taking some time away before starting the college process, the gap year programs offer all sorts of different kinds of opportunities for students to take advantage of. We have a program coming up on navigating a large public university experience, because we do have students who will look at large universities, even coming from small places like Berkeley Carroll. We have an upcoming event on the queer and trans experience in college. Another on the arts programming. So for those of you, we're going to talk a little bit about the artists, as you see in what is that, bullet point number 7 or so, or 6 or so. We'll talk a little bit about that today, but there's a scheduled program where you'll hear from folks in the arts as well. And then of course we have a series of programs that we do on financial aid, and some of these financial aid programs are actually targeted to 9th and 10th grade families. So we will be sending information about those. I'll send you all the dates, and then we'll send reminders to those over the course of the next couple of years, or the next couple of months. Like I said, you can see we've got a pretty big agenda here that we hope to get through in a timely manner, and we'll leave a little bit of time for questions at the end. And then, as I said, we'll send out the recording, and you can certainly follow up if you have questions beyond this. So without further ado, I'm going to start with the first slide and turn this over to my colleague, Joelle.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joelle Chen, and as Carolyn mentioned, I'm one of our Associate Directors of College Counseling. So we wanted to give you kind of a brief overview of the next 4 years if you're a 9th grade parent, or the next 3 years for sophomore families. So thinking of 9th grade, I can feel a little early starting in the college process, but it is thinking about developing the skills and the repertoire necessary to start kind of preparing for the college application later on in their high school career. So really thinking for 9th grade, it's about developing those skills. So time management skills, making sure that your 9th grader, your first year student, is really understanding how to balance fun with study, athletics? Are they involved in co-curriculars in Berkeley Carroll? That's a great way to explore their interests. Or affinity spaces in Berkeley Carroll, so that they have that opportunity to connect with other students. They might be doing things outside of school as well. So they're navigating or juggling a lot of balls here. And how are they balancing navigating all of that? Something that we tell ninth graders, and I'm sure you as parents and guardians already know, but grades really do matter, ninth grade. We are going to see college admissions are going to see ninth, 10th, and 11th year, the final grades. Quarter grades are a great indication of progress. Semester grades as well in ninth grade can continue to show progress, where students' strengths are, where they might need additional support. But it's only final year grades that will be shown on ninth grade transcripts. Final year for semester course as well. So the grades are important. They're also a really good foundation to build upon. So the skills that they're learning in their math course this year will help with their math course next year. Same with science, humanities, language. So making sure that they're feeling comfortable building those skills. And in terms of building additional skills, it's connecting to faculty members. So later on in the process, students will be asking for letters of recommendation. And it's most likely not going to be their ninth grade teacher, but that ninth grade teacher might teach them again in 10th or 11th grade. How are they connecting with their teachers? Are they asking questions? Do they feel comfortable asking questions? And if not, how can they feel more comfortable engaging in the class, finding their voices? What's going to be really exciting, and we'll talk about it for 10th grade, is they'll have a little bit more flexibility after ninth grade to choose some of their courses, to start kind of finding their niche. So starting to think about what are the studies or what are the subjects that they've gotten really excited about. And as I mentioned before, finding spaces that spark joy and bring excitement. So whether that's the co-curricular, sports, art, speech and debate, community action, social justice, it can be at Berkeley Carroll, but we have incredible guides. I'm sure you might have received an email already from Ms. Middleton, but if not, we have a summer enrichment guide, which has, I would say, over hundreds of activities local and across the nation for students to get involved in over the summer. Some have a cost, some are completely free, some are 1 week, some are 3 months. So it can really range in size and scope, but getting outside of Berkeley Carroll to see, I really enjoyed speech and debate at Berkeley Carroll this past year. What can I do outside of Berkeley Carroll to nurture that passion? And then in the spring, usually around mid-February, will be the curriculum night to choose those exciting 10th grade electives. So I'll actually go on to 10th grade to think a little bit about the academic and kind of skill building that's going to happen there for the college process. So in 10th grade, students actually get to enroll in electives in English and history of their choice. And it's always fun to talk to students in their senior, junior year. Some of their favorite classes that really shaped their trajectory were from the electives that they chose that they weren't sure they were going to like, or they knew they really wanted to deepen their passion in there. So it really gets to spark their intellectual curiosity. We also wanted them to continue to engage in those activities, or if they really weren't able to in ninth grade, ninth grade is that transition year for a lot of students. Maybe they were more focused on balancing academics and that rigorous course schedule. 10th grade can be another really great year to start engaging in the areas outside of academics that bring joy and looking at those summer programs. There might be school year programs that occur after school or on weekends. So finding ways to get involved. We are here as a resource. Their grade deans are here as resources to find those passions. In terms of preparing for the college process, students in their sophomore year will take a full-length digital practice ACT and a full-length digital practice SAT. This will happen completely online, and Mr. Almonte will talk a little bit more about test prep and what this looks like, but this is a great way for students to get a sense of which exam works best for them. We have them take both because for some students, ACT is really great for them. For some, the SAT works better for them. And so we have them take this so that they're actually able to see, wow, I did really well on the ACT, but the SAT is not my bread and butter, or vice versa. oftentimes we'll also see it's pretty equal. And we'll do a breakdown with our test prep organization that we work really closely with. One of them, Compass Prep, in the spring, so that you all know how to best support your student moving forward. And in terms of preparing for testing, again, Mr. Amate will talk a little bit more about what happens junior, senior year, but really in 10th grade, it's starting to get a sense of just which test is the right one for my student. And in 10th grade, we as a college office also start to meet with the students more frequently. We do meet with them in 9th grade as well. We'll have something coming up in the spring to talk to them post that first semester in 9th grade. But in 10th grade, we have 3 community time sessions with the college office. It is for students only. It is not for parents or guardians, but we'll have plenty of opportunities to connect with you all outside of those times. And then, of course, the upper school curriculum night to choose junior year courses, usually in February. So with that very brief overview, I will pass it along to my colleague Lewis to talk about 11th and 12th grade.
Thank you, Ms. Chan. So in regards to 11th grade, that is what we consider kind of like the starting point for the college process. Prior to that, students are preparing for some things. They're getting some more or less like general seminars about college topics, but that's when the 11th grade is when the process starts overall. So what we recommend for 11th graders, that's where really things kick up for a lot of students. Sometimes it's their first time where they're taking their first advanced level class with American Studies, but really continuing to work hard in the class and develop their interest, thinking ahead about how they're diversifying themselves in terms of their activities, in terms of their course load, things of that nature. So in terms of what programming looks like in 11th grade, we host our junior college night, as well as 3 community sessions with the junior class, just to get everybody on the same page, inform parents of what's ahead and what's going on with the process. And then those 3 seminars that we have with juniors are very direct, as they're getting ready to start the process and get into the thick of the process. We do very direct programming in terms of various things. So we actually just had one this week with the junior class where we were teaching them how to conduct research on colleges. We have another one where we introduce them to an online college search system that they can use and that we use to send their documents to college called SCORE. So there's a variety of different programming that we do prior to them being assigned a counselor and meeting with a counselor one-on-one individually. We had a question in the chat that I answered, but I'll answer out loud as well too. So in terms of the practice SAT, and the NSMQT, which is the National Merit Scholarship qualifying test. The PSAT can be taken by 10th and 11th graders, but at Berkeley Carroll, we have our 11th graders take that, and that usually happens in October of the fall semester of junior year. Aside from the PSAT, most students are preparing for testing, or they're completing test prep in 11th grade. And they're usually taking their first or second round of testing, whether that's the ACT or the digital SAT, either first semester, which I would say is a little bit more rare, and then in the spring semester, which is much more common. We usually have majority of our students take their first exam, either the SAT or the ACT in the spring of junior year. Aside from that, eventually the students in junior year will get assigned a counselor. We have a fabulous staff collectively with over 50 years of experience, which is great. We work individually with students, but we also work collaboratively behind the scenes. And basically the way that process works is the student will meet with the student will fill out a variety of different surveys. And I would say it's a big year of reflection, thinking about what they want, thinking about what worked for them here at Berkeley Carroll, what type of classes that they like, what type of environment they see themselves in, what type of major or things that they would like to study in college. Sometimes it's thinking about how big the institution is, if they want to be at an institution that has research, if they want to pursue the arts or something more pre-professional. So a lot of what we do in terms of our conversations and the surveys that we give those students is to allow them to take a step back and reflect on where it is that they want to move going forward. Then eventually the student will meet with the counselor to have a more in-depth discussion with that, answer some questions, gather some information. And then with that information, basically the college counselor creates a preliminary college list of about 30 schools for the juniors to start researching. And 30 schools sounds like a lot, but we break it down into different categories. So there's 10 schools that are REACH schools or traditionally selected colleges, or based on your student's academic profile might be very selective to get into. The second category are middles. So those are students' numbers are right on target with where they need to be. And there's a 50-50 chance that the student could be admitted or there could be a different outcome. And then the final category we call foundations here at Berkeley Carroll. Those are, there'll be 10 of those as well too. And that means that academically, your student is well above what the school is looking for. And then with that list of 30 schools, the student's long-term process is to whittle that list down, or any other schools that they're looking at outside of that list. So I would say a mix of some reaches, middles, and foundations of an average final college, just around 12 schools. That's usually what we have our students apply to. And basically, we sit down with the family and the student, we go over the list, we answer any questions. And then basically after that point is really where the collaboration starts to happen. A lot of one-on-one meetings, sometimes it's meeting with the family, sometimes it's meeting with just the student, and ensuring that they're feeling supported as they do their research process. In regards to 11th grade, the only thing that really needs to be completed is preparing for standardized testing and researching colleges. That's a prime time to start researching colleges. And we would say most students start visiting their first college on spring break of junior year. There are times where students start visiting colleges in 9th and 10th grade. If that's something that you're doing, we think that's fine. However, in my experience, a lot of times when I'm working with a student and they visited a college in 9th or 10th grade, they don't really remember it. Or because they're not within the midst of the process, they aren't as in tune as if they would have visited when they are in junior year. So we really recommend that. We think it's effective to start visiting and touring colleges in junior year. Aside from that, we encourage our students to complete test prep, which I'll talk about a little later. But in terms of test prep, Berkeley Carroll every year offers an in-person SAT and an in-person ACT class. We actually just went back to in-person as of this year. Prior to that, because of the pandemic, it was virtual. And aside from class options, if you feel like one-on-one tutoring is better, or if it works better with your student's schedule, there's a variety of different test prep organizations that we recommend that our families have seen great success with. And here at Berkeley Carroll, if you are receiving financial aid, we don't want that to be an obstacle for you or your family to be able to access test prep. So we're committed to financially assisting a percentage of your cost with those classes or with those one-on-one tutoring sessions based on the amount of financial aid that you receive. And then finally, one of our other really big events in junior year is the Brooklyn Independent School College Fair. So we actually have over 100 different colleges come, and we have a college fair in conjunction with other independent schools. So students will actually have access to a bunch of different college reps, a bunch of different colleges and universities to be able to meet with members one-on-one, to be able to discuss their interests, learn more about schools. So as students are going and proactively touring colleges and doing research, we're also creating initiatives to bring those colleges and universities to the students to be able to touch base with them and ask questions. And then in terms of 12th grade, that's really kind of where the summer going into 12th grade and 12th grade, that's really where the completing of the application actually happens. So we highly, highly, highly recommend, we cannot say this enough, that students take advantage of summer. Summer is a wonderful time to start drafting their first draft of their college essay. And just so you all know, when students apply to college, there's a 650 word personal essay that mostly every college or university is going to see. The summer is a wonderful time to get a head start on that. And then we also host writing workshops throughout the summer to help our students understand what a college essay is supposed to be and sound like, helping them brainstorm ways to pick a topic, and then actually getting them to do some exercises to start writing. So there's a lot of in-house workshops and work that we do with our students to ensure that they feel supported. Students should continue visiting colleges throughout the summer. And if they want to, they can start beginning to interview with some of their schools if they offer them. Prior to starting the senior year for school year, the senior school year, we have a program called Reboot Camp. And that's basically kind of like, hey, everybody, let's regroup. Let's get ready for the process. It's about to, hit us like a tidal wave, but we want to make sure that everyone feels prepared. And we do a really cool workshop. It's a case study where we actually have students review mock applications and kind of work as an admissions committee to see the behind the scenes, what happens to their application after they press submit. And ideally, by the first day of school, their base application, the demographic information, family information, ideally that application should be completed by their first day of senior year. Throughout senior year, seniors are meeting with us regularly. The way that this partnership works with the student and the counselor is that the student is in the driver's seat, and then the family and the counselor are in the passenger seat and the front seat. And basically, we're supporting that student as they are writing, as they're preparing to interview for colleges, as they are visiting colleges, as they're deciding where they want to apply. If they're thinking that they're going to apply early decision, we are kind of their soundboard for that. And we also provide data for students to really make informed decisions in terms of likelihood, selectivity, things of that nature. So we are regularly proofreading and editing students' essays. We are regularly meeting with them to figure out what's the best way to approach a particular question or essay that a college is asking. So we're very hands-on, and we're very happy to support students throughout that process. And then another big thing is really kind of understanding the different deadlines. So early action, early decision, and regular decision. So I'll just do a kind of a quick recap of what that is. Early decision is a binding agreement. So if a student identifies a school as their first choice school, and if they are completely committed and they want to take a shot with an ED school, they can apply ED. And if they are admitted to that school ED, basically what that means is they are going to commit to that school, cancel any other applications that are out there, not apply anywhere else, and they're committing themselves to that school. In terms of ED, it's a very big commitment. Not every student does it, but I would say the majority of students that are applying to school at Berkeley Carroll do. And ED can really be a game changer sometimes, because sometimes acceptance rates are higher in the ED round, or colleges are taking a larger portion of their class in early decision. Then we have students that apply early action, which is just an early application. They can send that out. If they're admitted, great. They don't have to commit to going until May of the end of senior year, which is the same deadline as all other colleges and universities. And then regular decision would be a student applies at a later deadline, which is typically around January. So the early action and early decision deadlines around November, and then regular decisions around January. And then again, there's no binding commitment with those plans. So a lot of our conversations consist of talking to students about figuring out if they're going to apply early, the likelihood of admission if they apply early, and figuring out what's the best strategy in terms of deadlines. And then spring of senior year are when decisions are made. So once a student has offers on the table, if they did not apply ED, we always encourage students to go plan and revisit schools. So they have something called admitted student events, where they basically, colleges and universities will roll out the red carpet, and they'll be able to speak with faculty, current students. They'll be able to meet other students that were admitted to really help them figure out if that's the right choice for them. And then ultimately they would have to pick whichever school they are deciding to enroll at by May 1st, again, if they did not apply early decision or early decision 2. So that's just a brief overview of 12th grade. There's a lot more that goes on in 12th grade, and we're happy to answer any questions, but I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Carolyn, to talk about the application process.
Great, thank you, Louis. Let me tell you a little bit what's on the screen first. You'll see little stars next to a couple of the bullet points we've listed here. We've listed pretty much everything that could possibly be part of a college application, like the physical process, but also the physical process of applying to the college, but also a little bit about some other pieces. The starred categories, we're going to talk a little bit more in subsequent slides about those, but I wanted to address a few of these things initially. And this may seem pretty obvious, but probably the most important part of the application when colleges are considering it is going to be the transcript. It's really the cornerstone of a student's academic experience. And when colleges are looking at a transcript, they're looking not just at the grades, as I think Ms. Chen had mentioned, grades on a transcript typically are final grades, so not quarters and not semesters unless it's a semester course, but final grades on a transcript. It lists all the students' academic history, includes the grades and course selections, but it also includes academic rigor. So within the curriculum offered at Berkeley Carroll, We do offer advanced level courses. Many of those students don't have access to until their junior or senior years. We make this very, very clear to colleges. So colleges get a full list of all of the courses that we offer. They can see which ones are considered advanced courses. And in terms of how they interpret that, there's many, many colleges and many high schools across the US and across the world that have very differing types of curriculum. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. I put together the transcript and the counselor letter in this first bullet point because the counselor letter is what we write. We write a narrative to go along with that transcript. So if students have different choices that they've made, they've doubled up in sciences, or they've taken 2 languages, or they've accessed an advanced level, say pre-calculus class without having had the advanced Algebra 2 course, for example, we help to provide that narrative that goes along with it to helps to show the colleges what pathways the students has taken. The transcript is very comprehensive. The way I often describe it is that it's a more of a floodlight context to what the student has experienced at Berkeley Carroll. Then students will choose in their spring of their junior year, they'll choose 2 teachers to write on their behalf. So the teachers get to provide a little bit more of what I think about as the spotlight letter. Colleges very often will ask that they will define teachers for this application process. They want teachers who have seen them in their junior year or their senior year, typically the time during which they're taking some of their more advanced courses where they've developed a little bit further as students, and the teachers really get to focus on what the students are doing in the classroom experience. Sometimes students will ask teachers from humanities and like English or history or language, and then we'll match that with say a science or a math teacher. But few colleges will make that distinction, and we give guidance along the way on picking teachers, even talking to students individually about what choices they're making so we can really comprehensively think about all the voices in the application. Students have on the application about 10 slots and 150 characters to explain the history of their extra and co-curricular activities. For 9th graders, that might seem like a lot. I've been talking with juniors recently. We just began to work with juniors. And for some of them, that doesn't seem like enough slots, but they get to list all of the activities, whether it's affinity groups or summer programs or co-curriculars that they've been involved in, internships, jobs, significant responsibilities at home. All of those are actually part of what an activities list would include. And one of my colleagues will be talking a little bit more about that a little bit later on. Students who might be involved in some of our distinctive programs like science research and design or an independent study or senior scholars, they have room on the application to actually talk about those particular involvements as well, and to be able to put voice to what they've experienced within those programs. So more than just the personal statement or supplemental essays that they write for the application, they do have the opportunity to voice a little bit more about what their individual experiences have been like. We'll talk a little bit more about standardized testing. We've mentioned the idea of interviews. For some schools, students do have the opportunity to interview. It's often smaller schools rather than larger ones. Some will offer the opportunity to start or begin interviewing that summer after junior year, or they may actually reserve interviews only for students who have submitted an application. So there's a range of different ways that schools might utilize the interview process overall. Mr. Almonte talked a little bit about early decision, early action, regular decision, and rolling decision overall, like what those different processes are all about. I skipped the interest and fit piece of it. In terms of how colleges use these interviews, or how they might use some of the visits that we talked about a little bit earlier, and we'll talk a little bit about later, it is sometimes a way that colleges can understand demonstrated interest. Colleges may want, as part of their process, to know that students are interested in them in addition to just submitting their application. So they will often record and take note of students coming to visit with them at the college fair that Mr. Almonte mentioned, visiting with them with one of the over 100 representatives that come to visit each fall and meet with students as seniors. So interest can be part of it, and fit for a university, fit for a college. Part of what students are writing about in those supplemental essays, they're really talking about ways in which they and the institution really would be a match. So we help students to craft those pieces as well. We'll talk a little bit about auditions and portfolios in a couple of minutes. And I just want to mention a couple of things about financial aid and merit scholarships. I mentioned earlier that we have a pretty robust financial aid program, 6 sessions over the course of a student's 4 years in high school. So some sessions are targeted to families of 9th and 10th graders. More are targeted more specifically to juniors and senior families as they're in the thick of the process. But this is a conversation that can begin earlier. If financial aid or looking for merit scholarships is something that's really important to you as a family, we want to make sure that students have that understanding as they go into learning about the process, and that we are aware of it as well as we begin to work individually with students and families, so we can help to shape a college list that's going to meet the needs of a family in terms of financial aid and merit-based scholarships overall. I wanted to talk a little bit, because this is primarily why we're here. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we help students do this. And you've heard a little bit of this come together, but we wanted you to see all the things that we're involved with doing with the students, everything from the A to Z on that college list. Mr. Almonte mentioned that we start with a list of about 30 schools based upon a student's and a family's criteria for colleges, but we do help them shape that. We help them cut that down. We make suggestions for further ideas. I always think of a student that I worked with in one of my first years at Berkeley Carroll, who came in the first day. I met with him and said, I'm very interested in engineering. Specifically electrical and mechanical. I'm very interested in business. He had all of these ideas that were very defined at that point in time. But when he began looking at colleges and began exploring the curriculum, he was actually much more interested in the liberal arts and sciences. So sometimes we go on a journey with students as they are discovering these ideas, but typically most students don't have a sense of what their major is going to be going into the process. As I mentioned, we write a comprehensive letter of recommendation. We do this after meeting with the students on a regular basis, but we also will have surveys that you and your students will fill out and complete so that we get a more comprehensive idea of the challenges your students may have faced, and the exciting opportunities that they may have taken advantage of. So it does become pretty comprehensive, and we get to know students really well. We coach them, as I said, on selecting teachers to write. We also, on the flip side, talk with teachers about writing those letters of recommendation and make sure that they're covering the kind of touch points that we know, based upon our years in working in college admissions, the things that we know colleges are really looking for. We brainstorm and edit essays and supplements. We do mock interviews. I just did one of those yesterday with one of my seniors. So it begins as early as I said, the summer of junior year, all the way through senior year. And then we support students in completing their applications overall. The last bullet point I list here is advocating for students. So we push a lot of information out to colleges. We're far from the times back in the 1940s and 50s when someone picked up a phone and said, boy, have I got the student for you to the Harvard admissions office. It doesn't work like that any longer, but we push a lot of information to colleges, and we're very, very thoughtful about the ways in which we present Berkeley Carroll and present the curriculum through our school profile, which is a tool that comes along with that school transcript, so that colleges understand the full context of your student's application. I wanted to talk a little bit about how colleges view transcripts and kind of how this works on the college side, to lend a little bit of perspective of how things worked. Let me talk about my most recent position. Before I came to Berkeley Carroll 8 years ago, I was director of admission at Barnard College, a small college right in Manhattan, and we had 620 students that would typically enroll each fall, so a relatively small size, a small grouping of students. And that last year I was there, they came from 463 different high schools. So all around the United States, all around the world. You can see here how many secondary schools are in the US, all sorts of different curriculum. colleges do understand that students are coming from different places. They don't expect everything to be a cookie cutter kind of review process. And the two key terms that they use very often when they're describing their process is really about context. And I've used that word already, providing the information about how Berkeley Carroll's curriculum is communicated to colleges. They also describe their process as holistic. So I mentioned earlier that the transcript is probably the most important part of the process. It's the cornerstone. It's an academic history. The other parts and pieces matter as well. The holistic process is considering all the parts of the application that students are submitting. So everything from their personal story and their history to sometimes test scores, sometimes not. And certainly extracurricular activities, all of the parts that they ask students to put together in an application. Going back to that review process at Barnard when I was there, we usually when I left, we read probably 7,000 applications. I think they're up to over 10,000 applications. But imagine the variety of different kinds of secondary schools, different kinds of curriculum that we received. And then I think about our colleagues across the street at Columbia. That year, they were receiving about 35,000 applications. Now their applications are up over 60,000. Imagine the variety, again, the types of programs and curriculum that they see. They consider students in context, knowing what's available to them and gauging how they've taken advantage of that curriculum. So whether we're talking about places that are the most selective in the country or outside of the country, or looking at what's available, or looking at other schools that are a bit less selective, they're always going to be considering that context. We do have a little bit of we have a slide a little bit later to talk about international education. I know that that's been an area that's been growing in interest for our students. We had 5 students enroll at colleges and universities abroad last year, and we have quite a few who are looking at colleges abroad as part of their process this year as well. So I'll leave that for a little bit later. We've talked about how grades count, those final grades, whether they are semester-long courses and a final grade for a semester, or year-long courses. And part of what we'll do with ninth graders in that session that Ms. Chen mentioned a couple of minutes ago is we show them what a transcript looks like. Redacted names, of course, but we show them what that looks like. We show them what a completed extracurricular activities grid will look like, just so they have an idea of what they're targeting in terms of building their information for the next couple of years that the colleges will see. We also think about setting a course for 4 years. Ms. Moore runs the curriculum nights every year for families to be thinking about course selections and course choices for the following year. And the College Counseling Office gets involved not only in being part of that presentation on that evening, but also working with the class deans on helping students to select their courses. So much of our planning is talking not just about the following year, but talking about all the way through the senior year. If you take this science class here, this is what sets you up well for this next level of science, and so forth. So it's about setting a course for 4 years. And I noted that there was one question about a semester program or a year abroad program. We have students who apply as sophomores for the HMI program, or the Mountain School, or the Island School, or Siegel. There's so many different kinds of semester programs that we're fortunate enough to have students participate in, or students who choose to go a semester or a year abroad, which is more often the case. And the curriculum builds really nicely into our curriculum. There are definitely some choices that students need to make about whether they will participate in certain things or not, or whether they want to join, whether it's a fall program or a senior program. But for colleges, when they see these semester programs or year abroad programs, it frankly makes the students really interesting. So we don't see a blip in terms of their ability to perform when they return, or what they've done while they're abroad. Students tend to do quite well on these semester programs or year abroad programs. They're well-respected programs and well-vetted by Berkeley Carroll. They're programs that are used by other schools. All 3 of us were very familiar with each of these programs before we came to Berkeley Carroll. So certainly we're happy to answer questions about that. The class deans can as well. But we think that these programs are a real boon for students when they're submitting their application to colleges. I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Mr. Almonte.
Awesome. So another part of the application process is standardized testing, which right now is currently optional. So just to kind of expand on what we said earlier and to answer some questions in the chat, Berkeley Carroll has a partnership with a organization called a Compass Education Group. And at the end, in the spring semester of 10th grade, the sophomores will take a practice ACT and a practice SAT. And basically what this does is it establishes a baseline and helps the student know which test they have performed better on and which test they feel more comfortable with. In terms of the exams, the practice exams, test prep isn't required to practice for those exams because again, those exams are used to figure out the baseline and then figure out how to build upon those skills and to improve on that score. There's a question in the chat about if test prep should start prior to 11th grade or sometimes as early as 9th grade. We don't recommend that just because students are still learning some of the skills and some of the concepts that are on those exams throughout 10th and 11th grade. So 9th and 10th grade, we really want our students to focus on just acclimating themselves to Berkeley Carroll, ensuring that they have a strong profile, because test prep is like picking up another class. So we don't want to spread our younger students too thin. And then when they have more life skills, more academic skills, I think it's better for them to prepare when they're closer to the process, but also when they're able to manage it more effectively. And then once you get your practice SAT and ACT score for your student, there's a consultation that happens with Compass Education Group to determine which might be the better route to take and to start focusing on that exam throughout 11th grade and when you're applying to college. The difference between the two exams right now, the SAT is shorter and has evidence-based reading and writing, as well as a math section. So there's 2 sections in the SAT. The ACT is different. It's a little longer, and there are 4 sections. So there's English, math, reading, and science. So both of the tests are very different. We don't recommend that students prepare for both or take both. Their colleges do not have a preference over one over the other. Ideally, it should be whichever one that your student feels more comfortable with or that they're performing better on, that should be the one that they pursue. In terms of these practice tests, they're done digitally through Compass because it's just easier to distribute them that way. But right now, the SAT is a in-person paper exam, and like I said, the ACT is an in-person paper exam, and the SAT is a digital exam. So sometimes that is a little different, but I imagine in a couple of years we might see the ACT follow suit with what the SAT did in going digital. And aside from that, in 11th grade, the digital PSAT and the NMSQT is offered to juniors in October. We do it in junior year because, like I said, students have a bit more understanding of concepts on the exam, and it can qualify them for national merit and recognition programs. The PSAT is a practice SAT, so it's not a real score that they can use to apply for college. Again, it's a practice exam to just give them a baseline to see where they're improving at. And the big thing is to qualify them for students for national merit and recognition programs. Yeah, so aside from that, to talk about standardized testing and how it's used in the application process. So after COVID-19, prior to COVID-19, there were a number of schools that were test optional, but majority of the schools required testing. And then the pandemic happened, and because students weren't able to access testing sites, or a lot of SAT or ACTs were being canceled, there was fear of infection, lots of things that were happening in the world at that time. Colleges decided to go test optional, and most of them were test optional for about 3 years. This year, we kind of came up on the end of that extension that they made, and some schools have started to extend that test optional policy as they're still gathering data to see if they want to continue using testing or eliminate it altogether. And then other schools have decided to reinstate testing. So some schools, for instance, like Georgetown University, MIT, public state institutions in Florida, Purdue University, just to name a few, require testing again, but still the majority of schools are test optional. And we've even seen some schools make a commitment to being permanently test optional, for instance, like Columbia University. What we advise our students to do is to prepare to do the exams. Ideally, they should be taking the SAT or the ACT at least twice, because then that allows them to take the highest sections from each score and use those to apply to college, which is called a super score. And in regards to testing, why we advise that students complete it is if there's a school that reinstates testing, they're prepared and they have it. Or if they do really well on the test, it's another piece of evidence that would look really good in their application that they can submit. With things being test optional at the moment, there's a bit of strategy. So if a student does really well on testing, we're probably going to advise that student to send their testing everywhere. If the student's not the best test taker, or they don't get a really good score, we probably will not advise the student to apply with testing. And if maybe their testing is solid, but they can't send it everywhere, we will work with the student to advise them where to send testing and where to apply test optional to. So in terms of the test prep timeline, like I said, junior year is best because it's more recent. It's closer to them being in the college process. And in terms of just what they're able to manage, things of that nature, it's where we see the most success. So ideally, students should be doing test prep about 3 months prior to their first exam, 3 to 4 months in advance, and ending test prep right around the time of their first exam. In terms of the test prep options, like I said, we have the bespoke class here at Berkeley Carroll. That's on Saturdays. We pick Saturdays because that way it won't interfere with any extracurricular activities or sports. Like I said, there are also one-on-one options as well. And in terms of testing, like usually students will take the first test in about March or May for the SAT in junior year, or February or April for the ACT. They'll get their first score back, do a quick refresh, and then the second exam that they'll take is either June or August or October for SAT, or June, September, or October for ACT. That's the most traditional timeline that we see. If you have a real go-getter junior and they want to start early, they can do their test prep the summer going into junior year, and then they would do their first test November, December of junior year, and then the second test in the spring, early spring of junior year, and then basically be done. If a student wants to include their testing or see what their testing is going to be for an early school, the latest test that they can take in senior year would be October. And sorry, if you could just go back real quick.
Yep.
And then in terms of the application years, so as you can see, over 2,000 colleges at the moment are currently test optional. We are in a very unique time with college admissions that things are test optional. So we've seen, you know, a lot of things shift and take a lot of anxiety off of students who aren't the best test takers. And when they mean test optional, they actually do mean it. It's not a trick. We have a lot of evidence with students applying with testing and without testing and seeing really great outcomes. And we're happy to have those conversations with parents once we start meeting with them in junior year. And then in terms of testing, like there's a ton of testing options. So as you can see in the ACT and the SAT, those are all the options that we have for students to take. Majority of the time students are taking the SAT or the ACT about 2 to 3 times. After that, the evidence shows that most students aren't fluctuating past that. We don't advise that a student takes it 5 or 6 times or keeps taking it until they get a score, because sometimes that doesn't happen, and that's okay. And like I said, you know, we're in a test optional time period. So I think it's a great time period to not feel so pressured with like having to get a particular score, because there's other options and other ways to apply. And then quickly talking about extracurricular activities. So the big thing with extracurricular activities that I like to say is that there's no right or wrong answer with an extracurricular activity. Sometimes students are saying, do I need community service? Do I need a pre-college program? All of those things sound great, right? And colleges aren't necessarily looking for one cookie cutter type of activity that they want to see on the application process. What we encourage students to do is to get involved, to use their time wisely, and ideally, if they can lean into some leadership positions in some of those areas of their life, it doesn't have to be all of them. That looks good too. But the part of the activities process should feel authentic. It's an opportunity for students to explore what it is that they like, to lean into things that they're passionate about. And then ultimately, when they apply to colleges or universities, when they're writing supplements or interviewing for a school, it's going to be a real authentic general excitement when they're talking about certain things or describing certain things, because it's things that they really like to get involved with. So we usually advise that as students choose activities and co-curriculars that nourish interests or spark new ones, try new things. You know, programs don't need to be costly or name brand. I think a lot of times people kind of fall into that trope, and that's not necessarily something that is effective. It's impressive, but so are a lot of other things. A part-time job is impressive. Co-curriculars or affinity groups at Berkeley Carroll are impressive. It doesn't necessarily have to be a pre-college program at a prestigious institution with a really recognizable name. Leadership comes in many forms, contributing to community. So, colleges understand that you're going to have students that are a part of executive council, or students that are leaders of co-curriculars or captains of their athletics team, but also sometimes leadership looks like being part of your church or your youth group or your synagogue. Other times it looks like taking care of family responsibilities or having a part-time job. There are lots of different ways that colleges are looking at extracurricular activities and measuring leadership. Depth is more important than breadth, and quality is more important than quantity. So in the application, it allows you to report 10 activities. In a perfect world, if a student has 10 really sustained activities that they're passionate about, that they've been involved with for, a year or two, or up to 4, with some leadership positions, that looks great. But also 6 really important, sustained, committed activities also look really good. We usually tell our students it's best to put the things that you dedicate most of your time to, and not something that you did 1 hour a week, 1 month out of the year. That's probably not the best thing to put on an application. So we really encourage 9th and 10th graders to get involved and to stay involved with things that are happening at Berkeley Carroll, because we're fortunate enough to have that be programmed as part of our day. Co-curriculars, affinity spaces, Berkeley Carroll talks, athletics, things of that nature. There's so much happening just within the school that can already start building their extracurricular activity portfolio, and then finding other opportunities. So we have a really great summer enrichment guide that we send to our students and our families that have really great opportunities. Students can find internships, pre-college programs in there. They can find volunteer opportunities, community service. And again, it's just naturally what your student is gravitating towards. And typically in junior year, we meet with our students to see what they're involved with. And if we feel like they need to kind of get a bit more involved, we encourage them to explore some different opportunities and options. But we're always happy to have those conversations with students throughout high school. And then really utilizing summer breaks is really important. That's a big chunk of time that students don't have to feel like they're spread thin because of academics, and can really focus on things, whether that's, again, picking up a part-time job, being a camp counselor, maybe they are doing a service trip. So there's lots of different opportunities during that time, and we encourage students to stay involved throughout the summer, because again, it shows us sustained activities and those focal points. And like we said, so the summer opportunities guide can be a really great starting point.
Great. I mentioned that we wanted to talk a little bit about the artistic applicants and talk a little bit about some areas of specialization. We've had a number of students over the past years who have indicated an interest in vocal performance, in performing other types of music, instrumental music, involved in dance, involved in theater, and those processes do involve a little bit more than just your typical application. These are students that are typically looking at a bachelor's of music, a bachelor's degree in music, or a bachelor of fine arts, and we begin by talking with students and families about the difference between a Bachelor of Arts degree, something that might be embedded in a liberal arts setting, versus something that's going to be very focused on performance, very focused on their art. So this includes visual arts, theater, dance, music, as you see here. And our faculty have incredible experience in helping students to put together auditions, portfolios, whether it's somebody working on theater tech or somebody who's auditioning for a dance program. We do rely on our faculty to help us get a sense of the student's talent so we can help to guide them appropriately and try and make some predictions about which schools are going to be a reach, middle, or a foundation. Imagine that when you add the talent piece, that can be somewhat hard to predict. But we work with them at every step of the way on this as well. Part of it is an organization, because it can be challenging when you add that other layer of involvement to that other layer of what a student might need to submit. There may be pre-screenings, there may be shortened applications that a student needs to submit before they get an in-person opportunity for an audition. There's also opportunities that visual arts students can take advantage of where they can submit a portfolio for a preview. A lot of the visual arts colleges and universities, they travel around the country and do travel programs, but they also do online programs. So one of my students, for example, is applying this year for a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree at Washington University in St. Louis, and she was able to meet virtually with the representative so they could go through her portfolio with her online, could see all the parts and pieces, and so she had some feedback before she actually submitted that portfolio. So faculty can be really helpful at Berkeley Carroll for that support. We also provide another level of support, and we help students as they start thinking about this along the process. I think you see noted here on the screen, there's some things that students can start in advance, for visual arts especially. Most of the programs are going to require somewhere between 12 and 15 pieces. So our arts faculty, we will kind of together start talking to students about that. Dr. Daniel and Mauricio Cortez usually will offer a program like right at the end of junior year to get students to think about what it is they need to put together in their portfolio. But it's something that they talk about in the portfolio class and the exhibition class as well, so that students are typically, by the time that they are juniors, they're much more familiar with what those requirements are. And then on a slightly different note, for students who might not be looking at a BFA program, Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, or might not be looking at a Bachelor of Music program, but they want to submit something that shows their talent in a particular area. They are really into photography, have taken it at Berkeley Carroll for 4 years, and they want to be able to show a little bit about what they've done, but they don't necessarily want to major in it. Many colleges will offer an avenue for that as well. They use a tool called SlideRoom, which gives them the opportunity to gather different media types. They may not require 12 to 15 pieces. They may encourage a student to choose their top 4 or 5 pieces, and that's something that can be shared with colleges as well. So I mentioned a little bit earlier that one of the joint program sessions that we do with some of the other independent schools is focused on the artistic applicant. That I think the date is in spring, but I'll send those dates to you so you can mark that on your calendars if that's something that you're really interested in. And then some folks had asked a little bit about athletic recruitment, and so we wanted to talk about that a little bit today. We're trying to jam pack everything that you asked about into this morning program. We usually will do an athletic recruitment event every other year. So this year is the off year, but if you are interested in receiving a copy of the video that we'd sent out in prior years, or the program that we did in prior years, we're happy to share that with you. We also have an athletic recruitment guide, which is actually linked to the Berkeley Carroll website. So, certainly we can provide you the location of that and help you know where to find that information. I'd say in the earlier years of high school, the two things that stand out to me the most in terms of what a student needs to begin thinking about is really getting an assessment of their skill level, talking with coaches, talking with our athletic director, taking the opportunities to do the tournaments or the ID camps. Often those don't start until sophomore year, but depending upon a student's level of talent, that might be something that they get engaged in a little bit earlier than the typical start of the application process. And getting a sense of that athletic ability might give them more of an idea of which colleges to target. It's also an opportunity to get in front of college and university coaches. I'd say commitment is the other piece that students can begin thinking about early on. I think sports, because it's such a wonderful way to connect with peers, and because it's such a wonderful way to express yourself in a very physical way, and to show talent, and to build upon talent. And there's so many things that being an athlete can gift a student over the course of their experience. But I think because it becomes so much of their experience in high school, very often, if that's their area, they may not be thinking about the next level in college, whether they have other things that they'd want to do, if they want to study abroad, if they want to get involved in other activities. It's really important to begin thinking about the balance between whether being a college athlete, and they certainly are scholar athletes, so they prioritize academics, but does that displace a student from involvement in other areas? And I've had students that have made that decision. My own nephew decided, he started out doing lacrosse recruitment and decided that he wanted to focus on other things as he went through the process, and he ended up being part of the gospel choir and the Latin dance team. So, things change very often when students get to college. So that's the other piece that I think is really important. These other pieces here, I think students sometimes think that their athletic ability is going to outweigh their academics, and academics are very closely tied to how colleges are reviewing applicants and how they're giving feedback to coaches when they're trying to recruit students. So keeping up with academics, maintaining those strong grades, taking those advanced courses when available, challenging themselves with the rigor of the curriculum, that's certainly something that we continue to recommend. And then the skill development. I mean, your coaches are probably giving you guidance on that, especially if you've got some outside coaches that you're working with. Again, it's an opportunity to assess abilities, but it's also an opportunity to increase skills and get up to perhaps the level of what colleges are expecting. Students can get onto that communication train pretty early on, because there's forms that they can fill out on the college's athletic websites. They can get onto a mailing list very easily by filling out an interest form for recruitment, and all colleges have those prominently displayed on their websites. But let us know if you want us to send you a link to the athletic guide and the video that we have from the prior year's presentation. We will do it again next year. Certainly, it's part of our every other year rotation. And with that, I'm going to switch things again and turn it back over to Ms. Chen.
All right. So we know that there's been a lot of questions about international admissions. So at Berkeley Carroll, we have seen every year more and more students who are looking to Canada, the United Kingdom, Europe for colleges. So we are all well versed. We've been working very closely with our colleagues outside of the US to make sure that our students are prepared and are eligible for admissions. The process for international admissions is a little bit different, but the priority that we wanted to share with you is that academics make a lot of the decision for our international universities. Canadian universities sometimes don't even want letters of recommendation from us. They really are focused on that transcript. There are going to be some institutions, and in particular, we find this in the UK and in Europe for the very highly selective institutions, Cambridge, Oxford, London School of Economics, that will only consider US applicants with AP exams. And while that is not Berkeley Carroll, we do not offer APs, we do not offer AP examinations, that doesn't mean that there aren't still incredible institutions available to students who are going to consider our advanced coursework, potentially SAT or ACT scores as well in the admissions process. We actually have a list of over 100 schools across Canada, United Kingdom, Ireland, other parts of Europe that will consider students without AP examinations. And I saw there was a question as well if we have experience working with universities that aren't known as having a lot of American students, like a St. Andrews, like Trinity College, Dublin, University of Edinburgh. I actually had a student last year who thought that they wanted to go to the Netherlands for their education. They were admitted to several Dutch universities and actually decided to go to Ireland instead. So I think that's also a cool part of this process is students' preferences change. They think they want one thing, and then as admissions decisions come in, they decide to go another route as well. But we do have experience. We work closely. We will reach out to schools to get a sense if a student is eligible. There are just some schools that are not as flexible, and that's an important part to understand with international admissions. What we want to do to wrap up is really talk briefly about campus visits, because I know that's something that's on a lot of students and families' minds. Right now, you do not have to start planning college visits. A lot of them will start taking place in junior and senior year. However, 9th and 10th grade can be really great to start to visit colleges as you travel. So if you're visiting family, if you're going on a vacation, oh, there's a college nearby, why not see just to get a sense of, hey, do I like this college that's in a major city, or this small town college feels so cozy and friendly, and I'm so excited to kind of see smaller town college or college town vibes. It's about experiencing different types of schools, and we really want to emphasize it's not just about the most selective. As Mr. Armonte mentioned, we create a college list, and it's not going to be all of the selective institutions. It's going to be institutions that match your students' academic interests, cultural interests, student life interests, so many other pieces play a really, really big role. So taking times to show students what a college can look like, while also knowing that every college is going to look different, and that small liberal arts college might be just as great a match as that highly selective research university. So a couple of other things to utilize with the campus visit is the proximity that we have in New York City to so many colleges. So if you want to see an arts institute like Pratt Institute, that's right here in our backyard. Do you want to see a university without a traditional campus? New York University can be really great for that. And there are other universities around the country that have a more open campus. Do you want to see a traditional college campus? Well, you could go to a Fordham or a Columbia University. Want to see a women's college? Then Barnard College is right there uptown. Sarah Lawrence has a unique kind of core curriculum flexibility. SUNY Purchase to see a state institution, or CUNY Hunter to see a city institution. There are so many schools around here that we really encourage you to utilize your backyard first before making major plans to travel in that first year, sophomore year, because we have just so many different types of institutions around Berkeley Carroll, and they're all within an hour. Public transportation too, so pretty easy to get to. So as we wrap up, we did want to share a couple of resources with you all, and this is not an expansive list at all. Feel free to take a screenshot. We'll also send these out at the end, but these are just a couple of resources that can be really helpful for starting to think about the college process. Want to start with the 3 books that you see at the bottom. Fisk Guide to Colleges. We actually share that with every single junior, so there's not a need to buy that. We give that to every junior student, but can be a really great resource, as can the best 389 colleges now. I think they added one more college, and then prior to that it was 387. So I love that every year they're just adding new colleges that are really cool for students to consider. And then colleges that change lives. Those might be colleges that maybe you haven't heard of, but the experience for students on that campus have just sometimes outperform those big name institutions that you might have heard of. The opportunities available there to really connect with faculty members, peers, professional development. So those are just some text resources. There's also a lot online. There's a lot online that's great. There's also a lot online that's not great. So if you're ever sure, like, is this a good resource? Don't hesitate to reach out. But these are some great resources here. For example, Compass Prep that we already talked about, the College Board, they administer the SAT and PSAT. They have a pretty good search engine. Not as great as it did in the past, but still pretty good at giving overview of schools, what they're looking for, student life. The Department of Education College Scorecard, I really like because it also gives information about financial aid, student loan debt, and I know that's something that's really important for a lot of students. We have our college recruitment and Berkeley Carroll Student Athlete Guide that Ms. Middleton mentioned. And then we also know that a student's identity is a really important part of the process for many of them. So thinking, is this campus going to be supportive of who I am? So there are websites like Campus Pride talking about LGBTQ friendly campuses, our list of historically Black colleges and universities for students who are interested in attending an HBCU. And we do have our HBCU event as well. And then the Hillel Guide for Jewish students who are interested in seeing, is there a Hillel on campus? Is there a strong Jewish community on campus? Again, this is not expansive, but just a couple of resources to highlight. And then, of course, for financial aid, there's findaid.org, and then FastWeb. That's a great one for outside scholarships. They have a lot of resources. As a note, you should never pay to apply for a scholarship. These are all free applications for scholarships. And then to wrap up in terms of financial aid, we've actually started partnering with Paul Martin, part of College Money Method, to offer specifically focused and targeted financial aid support throughout this process. So he'll be offering a session on March 13th for 9th and 10th grade families. There will also be sessions for 11th grade and 12th grade families throughout this process, because every family and grade is at a different step in this process. So I know we've gone over time a little bit, but we did have a lot that we wanted to cover. There's a couple of questions in the chat that I hope we were able to get to. I do see one real quick for international missions for EU citizens. If you do hold EU citizenship, that can help for financial aid. I wouldn't say akin to in-state, out-of-state, because there is admissions requirements that are going to be different for an EU citizen abroad than an EU citizen in that home country. So it does look a little bit different admissions, but for finances, absolutely, you usually are able to get the EU cost. Ms. Middleton, Mr. Amante, are there any other questions that we need to answer or we are able to get to?
Sorry, I was muted. I think we got to the majority of them, and one of them is being answered live now. But thank you so much for joining us this morning. Hopefully this session was really helpful. You know, we know that just in the beginning of this process, there'll be multiple more programs after this, you know, going more in depth about things. But this is just, I know it's a lot of information, but it's just to kind of give you an overview of everything. But things get more specific as the years goes on.
Thanks so much, everyone. We really appreciate your time.
Have a wonderful morning.
Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.